This is Rebecca with Cell Phone Repair Weatherford, and today we're doing an iPad Pro 11-inch second generation screen replacement. First, we're going to start off by applying some alcohol to the edges and using a metal pry tool and a plastic card to start prying up that broken glass. It sometimes takes a minute, but we just got to work around every corner and be super careful at the top not to damage the Face ID flex cables. As well, making sure we're being careful around the display flex cables. Now we scooch that screen down just a little bit and remove the 2 Phillips screwdrivers. And remove that bracket covering the Face ID connector, flip that screen upside down, and go ahead and remove those display cable connector covers screws. And then we are going to go ahead and remove the screw out of the battery connector and put a plastic card in between so the battery connector does not touch. Then we unplug those display cables, all 4 of them. Now we're going to set that screen aside. And we're going to go ahead and remove those 2 Phillips screws and start lifting that adhesive that's covering the second Phillips screw. And start to move that display cable up just slightly so we can be careful not to rip it, and then remove that second Phillips screw and the bracket over it and unplug those 2 touch connectors. And now we start gently prying up the Face ID sensors. This part is extremely important to be very gentle with, just because it is separating the tiny shards of glass while at the same time trying not to damage the Face ID connector. Just because if this connector gets damaged, there's unfortunately no way to restore Face ID capability to the iPad. So we start prying those tiny pieces of glass out of it and go ahead and get that removed. Any piece of glass can shatter the new screen, so we have to get it out completely. Now we're going to go ahead and get some of that glass contained and get out that new screen. Make sure that we took all the adhesive covers off of it, and now we're going to go ahead and pry all the old glass out of the frame. This part can be lengthy and time consuming, and you may have to heat it up a couple of times and use some alcohol to get it off. Once that's removed, we're going to go ahead and reapply the Face ID. Now that that Face ID is reconnected, we're going to go ahead and plug in those display cables. Now that we've plugged in those display cables, we're going to go ahead and screw the bracket back on them. Now we're going to go ahead and grab that new screen and go ahead and plug up those flex cables. And we're going to go ahead and plug in that battery by removing the plastic card we put in between the connectors. And then we're going to go ahead and put that Phillips screw back in to plug it in. And now we're going to take our display cover bracket and put it right back over the battery connector and the display cables. And we're putting those 3 Phillips screws right back in. Alright, once that's done, then we're going to lightly close that screen and then turn it the other way and go ahead and connect the Face ID cables. Once that's connected, we're going to go ahead and put the bracket right back over it and then put those 2 Phillips screws right back in there. Being careful not to tug too much on the Face ID. Now we're going to start closing that screen, and we just gently push down on the corners, and if there's any old adhesive that builds up, like bubbles up in between, which we did appear to have, just either lay it down or take it out, and then we can finish closing up that screen. And we're going to go ahead and turn it on. Make sure it comes on, and then we're done. The repair is complete.